Good evening, everyone. I am Anthony Simpkins, President and CEO of Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago, and it is my pleasure and my privilege to welcome you to the 2022 Neighborhood Housing Services Annual Awards and Fundraiser. I want to thank each of you for your support, really your unwavering support of Neighborhood Housing Services and your commitment to racial and economic equity. And that's for the families and the communities that NHS has worked hard to support for, well, over 47 years now. The past few years has been really difficult, full of a lot of uncertainty. But one of the things that has remained constant is the dedication and professionalism of the employees of Neighborhood Housing Services who never stopped working every day to help the families and the communities that we serve. So, let's really give them, round of applause. But we could not have done this work without you, without the residents and the community leaders that we work with every day, without the lenders and our corporate partners and our foundations that work with us and support us every day. We could not do this work without you. So we are so thrilled and honored that you are here with us tonight. So thank you very much. And this is what we do. We work with financial institutions and foundations and government and community residents to remove barriers that keep low-income and working-class families and neighborhoods of color from achieving the American dream of homeownership. Our staff members work to sustain, revitalize, and empower low and moderate-income Black and brown communities throughout the Chicagoland area by advocating for working families, by doing neighborhood programming, resident leadership development, mortgage lending, real estate development, and homeownership and financial education and counseling. Because we believe that homeownership is central to building generational wealth and prosperous communities. What we do at NHS is we invest in people. And NHS as an organization is growing. We're focusing on becoming financially stronger, making a greater positive impact, and increasing our outreach and our media presence so that more people know about what we do and can take advantage of the amazing programs and services that we offer. And we're focused on being a more effective advocate for the neighborhoods and the families that we serve. You'll hear lots more about that today from our awardees and from our special guests. We work every day closely with our government officials and agencies as well. The city, the state, and the county are really crucial to our mission. But of course, so are the community organizations, the lenders, the corporate partners, and the foundations. You're all indispensable to our work. And again, thank you for honoring us with your presence tonight. You're going to really enjoy the program tonight. As I said, it's really good to see people in person for a change, right? So we've really put together a good program for you, including a really fascinating discussion with Mr. John W. Rogers, Jr. of Ariel Investments. He's really an icon in financial services, but he's also an icon now in the public discourse about equity, inclusion, and diversity. So I'm really looking forward to having the discussion with him, and I'm sure you are too. Tonight, we also recognize those who, while achieving great personal success, have used their skills, their talents, and their platform to promote the fight for racial and economic equality in our neighborhoods and really in our nation. Tonight, we take time to honor those who are in the trenches, doing the work every day, helping working families and communities of color. And they do this without seeking any recognition. So we are excited tonight that we're able to uplift their commitment and their accomplishments. Again, thank you for being here with us tonight and contributing to our mission with your support and your financial contributions. So, let's get started.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mayor Loury Lightfoot, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank and congratulate you for your consistent work in neighborhoods across Chicago through NHS. Your work to uplift our communities is invaluable and directly supports my administration's signature neighborhood investment initiative, Invest Southwest. Invest Southwest brings together government, business, philanthropic, and community leaders to lay the foundation for long-term revitalization in underinvested neighborhoods on Chicago's south and west sides. Combined, our efforts have helped transform communities while realizing new ways to achieve economic and social justice. Home ownership, as you know, plays a key role in our ability to achieve these goals, as well as improve residents' lives and the communities they call home. I look forward to your continued partnership as we work together to increase opportunities for home ownership, engage our communities, and provide focused investment in the neighborhoods that need it most. Thank you, and please continue to be safe.
Chicago is a city of neighborhoods, defined by rows of bungalows and two-flats that families have lived in for decades. But for many Chicagoans of color, obtaining a home means overcoming systemic barriers and racial disparities in mortgage lending, and also a lack of quality, affordable housing inventory as a result of decades of disinvestment in neighborhoods of color. How do we confront these challenges and give Black and Latino families the same access to the generational wealth-building power of homeownership? At NHS, the solution is simple. We invest in you.
For us, it's not just talk, we deliver. 93% of our mortgage lending has been to Black and Latino households, and we've invested over $678 million in neighborhoods.
We invest in your financial education because we know knowledge is power. Our workshops and one-on-one consulting builds a foundation for success. We empower and support you through the entire process.
Then, our experienced lending team works with you to identify the right mortgage product and determine if you're eligible for down payment assistance to help purchase your home.
By helping you through the entire homeownership journey, we're working to create thriving, mixed-income neighborhoods of choice, prosperous communities residents are proud to call home.
Good evening. I'm Robin Coffey, the Chief Credit Officer at NHS, and this year marks 35 years of service provided by our affiliate, Neighborhood Lending Services. NLS has helped make homeownership a reality for many. With a generous aid of our funders and lending institutions, we've distributed over $678 million in lending to create opportunities and meet the needs of those within the communities we serve, and we do not plan to stop. Beside me is Bruce Martin, Interim Board Chair, and also a member of the NLS Board of Directors.
Thank you, Robin. Yes, NHS has been doing this magnificent work for over 47 years. NHS is a leading organization working towards racial and economic equity, meeting the needs of residents and confronting challenges. Like this year's recipient of the Community Impact Award, Ms. Cecile de Mello.
I grew up on the south side of Chicago in Washington Park, and my family was very loving. We centered God around our life, but we had the worst luck. And so I kept asking questions about how did we get here? What could have been done differently? And the more that I looked into those questions, I found answers around, institutional racism, redlining, and predatory lending. All of these things were factors that were impacting my family. I love the work that I do because it incorporates research, it incorporates community building, building relationships with my neighbors and the people that I identify with from my community, action, policy work, and having fun. And the other part of the work is, so I said that I started, in this work because of my family that I grew up with, my mom, my dad, and my sisters. But now I'm more rooted in the work because of my own children. And so we live in Inglewood. Right now, I'm the executive director of Teamwork Inglewood. And so the work that I do, I'm very passionate about. I've been working really hard because the things that I accomplish, and even the work that I've done across the city, all of those things help with my children having a better future in this community or across the city of Chicago.
And her whole persona, her whole personality, it's easy to be endeared towards her. And her becoming a part of Teamwork Inglewood and subsequently becoming a director, it was such a good fit. If anybody deserves that award, the NHS award, is Miss Cecile Mello.
I want to thank everyone for nominating me for this award. I feel so humbled and I'm so thankful for everyone even considering me. I also want to thank Neighborhood Housing Services for this opportunity. I'm excited to see what the future looks like between Neighborhood Housing Services and communities of color across the city as we take on new challenges and think of new ways to approach the issues that are impacting our community. And with that, thank you for this Community Impact Award.
Hello, my name is Chris Sweetland, and I'm the Regional President for Huntington Bank in Chicago. We are fully committed to making lives better, helping businesses thrive, and strengthening the communities where we serve. That is why last summer we announced a $40 billion 5-year community investment plan so that we can bring some investment to those underserved communities where we operate here in Chicago. It is also why we are so happy to support the great work that is being done by Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago to support those same communities by empowering home ownership and economic stability. Thank you.
Good evening. On behalf of Ocwen Financial and its subsidiaries, PHH Mortgage and Liberty Reverse Mortgage, we are proud to once again sponsor Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago's annual awards dinner. Since the start of the pandemic, and with the help from NHS Chicago and other local and national nonprofit housing counseling agencies, Ocwen has held over 90 borrower outreach events across 28 states. This year, we will increase our outreach efforts to assist homeowners who continue to be negatively impacted by the pandemic. Helping homeowners is what we do, and we are here for you, Chicago. Also, congratulations to all of tonight's honorees.
Hello, I'm Allison Porter-Bell, Director in Community Lending at BMO Harris Bank. Our purpose is to boldly grow the good in business and life, and we understand that we have a responsibility to help shape a better future for our city where everyone has access to affordable homes, safe communities, and a thriving future.
I'm Rob McGee, Senior Vice President and Market Manager for Community and Economic Development at Fifth Third Bank. I'm also a proud member of the NHS Board of Directors. Fifth Third values our partnership with NHS in the work to establish equity and access to resources for communities challenged by marginalization and disinvestment. The work of NHS is vital. Economic inclusion is important to the area's residents, their communities, and the region. And you can count on our support as we continue to move forward, creating vibrant neighborhoods filled with opportunity and hope for all.
Coming of age in the late 60s, I was greatly influenced by the public witness of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He spoke powerful words of faith, and it was his rhetoric of hope that inspired me and continues to serve as my moral compass. As a legislator, I have tried to emulate Dr. King's life work by supporting progressive agendas and supporting and sponsoring legislation that seek to create economic and social welfare policies that reduce inequality, expand opportunities, and strengthen communities.
It's so fitting that one of our most prominent organizations, NHS, is recognizing Senator Collins for her great work over the years, over the decades now. Senator Collins has been an advocate for community residents, both as homeowners, renters, business owners, and everything in between.
Well, I'm extremely honored and humbled to be the recipient of the Gale Cincotta Visionary Award. She was a force to be reckoned with, and it was because of her activism, her organizing acumen, and her commitment to fair and affordable housing that inspired me to create the Illinois Community Reinvestment Act. My success in fighting predatory and discriminatory financial practices was due in large part to the support and partnership with NHS and other grassroots organizations that have kept the doors of opportunity, access, and equity open during these turbulent times of challenge and change. Without NHS guidance and advocacy, working with their clients and the residents in keeping stable communities secure and opening the doors for home ownership, I would not have been successful in my legislative agenda in providing the services needed for my constituents.
Kimberly Evans, Executive Vice President and Head of Corporate Sustainability, Inclusion, and Social Impact. At Northern Trust, we recognize the importance of financial security in creating strong communities. And because of that, we're pleased to partner with NHS in their efforts to encourage wealth generation through home ownership in diverse communities. Congratulations, NHS, and continuing your great work.
I'm Daryl Newell, Vice President with PNC Bank's Community Development Banking Team. On behalf of PNC Bank and my colleagues in the region, I'm pleased to join you in celebrating the transformative work of NHS. NHS leads the way in providing affordable housing solutions and much-needed services to Chicagoland residents. And most importantly, we must acknowledge the dedication of the NHS staff, who through their passion and commitment continue to help thousands of families achieve their goal of home ownership. When home ownership rates rise, other benefits materialize like wealth building, economic mobility, and improvements in quality of life. So thank you, NHS, for all that you do in delivering transformative impact for generations of homeowners since 1975. PNC is proud to stand alongside you in supporting your mission.
I am Linda Lutton. I'm the neighborhood reporter at WBEZ, and I'm accepting this award on behalf of my colleagues, Alden, Loury at WBEZ and Andrew Fan at City Bureau. I don't think it was a surprise to anyone that banks lend more in Chicago's white neighborhoods than our Black and Latino communities. But I do think the disparity we discovered, the utter scale of it, was shocking. I'm really proud we helped document that disparity so Chicagoans can work to change it. I also want to say how completely honored we are to win this award. Journalists are used to getting journalism awards from other journalists, but the awards that have always meant the most to me are awards that come from the communities we write for. So I just want to say what an incredibly deep honor it is to know that our work has been useful in creating a more just, equitable Chicago. And thank you, NHS of Chicago.
My name is Mercedes Pickett. I was born in the Garfield Park, Humboldt Park area, and growing up, seeing the beautiful lagoons and the park districts, especially the Garfield Park Conservatory, allowed me to see the beautiful hidden gems in our neighborhood. I didn't want to walk away from such a beautiful place, and it's very affordable. So I saw that this would have been an amazing investment, not only for myself, but for my children. My first introduction to NHS was in 2018. I received information from my mother in regards to grant programs and information sessions. Within the 8-hour course, I learned how to manage my credit score, how to connect with real estate agents, understanding the entire process from searching for a home, inspections, and additional hiccups that may come about. It was a beautiful experience. In the early 2000s, my mom was having issues paying her mortgage, and I believe she was 2 months behind in contacting the city for support. She informed me that she called 311, and 311 told her about the NHS program. They were able to assist her with 2 months' rent, and as long as she owned the home, she did not have to pay back the loan. 5 years ago, we paid off the mortgage, and we had a nice celebration because that was us gaining property. Not only did my mother successfully pay off her mortgage, but she transferred it over into our names. So that gave us a great head start. Due to the NHS program, I was already saving, I was already building my credit, and I was in the best situation to invest in a home. My home went from $235,000 to $357,000 in 1 year. She was an elderly Black woman, and oftentimes during the summer, she would sit on the porch and enjoy the weather. I work from home, and sometimes I would hear the ice cream truck, or we had individuals selling snowballs, and when I go downstairs, I would see her, and I would always ask, would you like anything? And it was always a yes, or maybe not. And I'm like, if you think of anything, when I come back, just let me know. Just having that relationship with an elderly Black woman, it made you feel loved, it made you feel safe. Even though I'm here protecting her, I'm here building, creating something for her. Just seeing her every single day created a sense of home. And I would not have expected just seeing my tenant would have created a sense of home. I was actually cleaning up one Saturday, and she was out on the porch, and she was just informing me how this was her first time ever having a Black landlord or landlady. And she informed me that she'd been on the West Side her entire life, and there was lack of opportunities that she was presented. So to see a Black man and a Black woman cleaning up around her home, maintaining her home, giving her things that she may not have thought to consider, it created trust. It created a relationship, and I'm honored to have been that presence in her life, and I'm honored for her to have been the first tenant in my life. And now I have the opportunity to continue the tenancy with her daughter, and for her daughter to see the space that we're building, how we have created an amazing relationship with her mother and want to continue that relationship with her. It's inspiring. It allows me to take the next step and continue to invest on the West Side of Chicago.
What an incredible story. Hello, everybody. Here. After 2 years of being virtual, we are finally back together. So I think the last time, yes, please give yourself a hand for that, please. The last time we were together, NHS was the last major event that was held before the lockdown took place. And we were in the pandemic, we didn't even know it. But that was the last 500-member gathering that we had, so it's good to see everybody again. Good evening, I'm Jerry Lumpkins. I run the real estate group here for Bank Loury, and I'm also a proud member of the board of directors. And wow, what an incredible story this was. I mean, you know, this story right here is all the reason why I'm a part of NHS. I've been a part of public housing, I've been a part of affordable housing, but this is about building legacy, this is about building wealth, this is about transitioning, and you heard the comment in there about, you know, having a head start or having, you know, that extra kind of lift by just being a homeowner and now being a property owner and renting to people in the community. So this is what NHS is all about, and this is why I'm so proud to be a part of this organization. But please give another round of applause for that video. Very touching, very touching. So no other organization in Chicago can offer the level of one-stop housing solutions provided by NHS. NHS has helped thousands find homes and kept thousands of families in their homes.
and works to stabilize and recover properties in some of the most challenged areas in the city. But we can't do it without you, and we very much appreciate all the support that we've gotten from you throughout the years, and certainly throughout this year and this evening specifically. I know many of you have already supported NHS tonight, and we greatly appreciate your generosity. Thank you very much. Thank you from the board, and thank you from the organization. We really thank you for that. But if you can reach in your heart and give just a little more, it would mean so much to the families across this city who rely on the work of NHS. Some of you may be attending as a guest of your company, colleague, or friend, and we humbly ask that you consider donating. Every dollar counts. Every dollar counts. Nothing's insignificant. Every dollar helps the mission that we're looking to continue. And so every dollar counts, and no gift is too small or too large. So if you feeling that kind of way tonight? And so any donation you make is 100% tax deductible. We also haven't forgotten about those of you who are viewing online. So we do have a fair amount of folks who are viewing online. So hit that donate button, and we're also so just thankful for you guys just joining us tonight. This is a beautiful, beautiful gathering, beautiful venue, but you guys look great. You look amazing, amazing tonight. And so now let's hear from more of our key supporters and transformative partners, CIBC, State Farm, and U.S. Bank. I'll direct your attention to the screen.
Hi, I'm Glenn Kelman, CEO of Redfin, a technology-powered real estate brokerage, but also a proud supporter of NHS Chicago. We are proud to support this organization because we share the same mission to make housing more accessible, more affordable, more fair. And never has that mission been more important than now. If you look at Chicago over the past 10 years, the rate of owner-occupied homes in predominantly black neighborhoods has fell 14%. The likelihood that an American's going to own a home is 75%, but for black and Latino Americans, it's less than 50%. That is an outrage in modern times that there is such a wide disparity, and NHS Chicago is really working to narrow the gap through homeownership classes, but also with down payment assistance. We looked at dozens of organizations to support. Real estate agents across Chicago recommended NHS because we know about your track record. We're tough with our money. We don't part with it easily. We look at results. We're very data-driven. You passed our tests with flying colors. No organization does more for Chicago homeownership, especially for people of color, than NHS. So thank you for letting us be a part of your journey. Please, if you are participating in this event, get your wallets out, raise your paddles, do whatever it takes, because NHS Chicago is doing the Lord's work.
Hi, I'm Amy Ewan, Chief Marketing Officer and Head of Communications and Community Development for CIBC in the U.S. We are proud of our long-standing relationship with NHS. Your consistent work to ensure quality housing is vital. Our commitment to you remains strong. We believe everyone should enjoy the stability and wealth-building benefits that come with homeownership. On behalf of all of my CIBC colleagues, congratulations, NHS. You can count on us to be with you as we build healthy, vibrant Chicago neighborhoods together. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cruzan, the Regional President for U.S. Bank here in Chicago, and proud trustee of Neighborhood Housing Services. U.S. Bank is focused on closing the gap between people and possibility. We believe everyone deserves an opportunity to achieve financial stability, and we know access to safe, affordable housing is a key part of that. We also know that home ownership strengthens our communities. It's because of this commitment to home ownership that we've partnered with Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago for more than 25 years. Keep up the great work, NHS. Your efforts are needed now and more than ever.
NHS Chicago, your theme, Reaching Back, Moving Forward, is very appropriate for State Farm. This year, we celebrate our 100th anniversary. In preparation for this great occasion, we have opened our archives and we are sharing some of our historic milestones. Our relationship with NHS, spanning over 4 decades, has certainly helped us move forward as a company started by a farmer for farmers. Our connection was established when a group of Chicago housing advocates came to our headquarters in Bloomington, Illinois, to represent the citizens and residents of Chicago. State Farm was responsive to those needs and answered their concerns. Thank you, NHS, for your advocacy. Your efforts move communities forward.
And now it's my pleasure to bring before you my friend and colleague and leader of this great organization, the CEO and president of NHS Chicago, Anthony Simpkins.
Thank you. You're welcome, brother. All right. Am I on? Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for being here. Congratulations to our awardees. And we have another award that we want to give out tonight. This is our Transformative Impact Award. And this is an award for an individual that has worked tirelessly to uplift the communities that we serve. It's someone that's a partner with NHS, someone from the corporate, philanthropic community, and tonight we want to present the award to John W. Rogers, Jr. Thank you. John, thank you for being with us. John is the co-CEO, founder, and chief investment officer of Ariel Investments, the first and largest Black-owned investment firm in the United States. Thank you. Thank you. So John is not only a great investment professional, but he is also a tireless advocate for He's also a tireless advocate for what we've been talking about all night, which is equity and inclusion and racial and economic equality. So what we're going to do tonight, with John's permission, is we're going to sit down and have a little chat about some of these issues tonight.
Thank you. I really look forward to it. Really appreciate the honor. This is great to be here in such a wonderful crowd and see so many friends everywhere I look. So looking forward to the conversation.
All right, please have a seat. So John, thank you again for being with us tonight. We're very pleased that you're with us. We're very honored that you're with us. And I thought, a good place to start the conversation would be to learn a little bit about who John W. Rogers Jr. is. We know that your own family history is really compelling and really has its own connection to the issues that we're talking about, racial and economic equity, the growth of generational wealth. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your own family history, your connection with Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that.
Well, thank you. It's as I get older and older, I start to appreciate my family history more and more and understand how privileged and lucky I was to have the parents that I had and the extended family that I had. Just start with to say that you mentioned Tulsa. My great-grandfather, J.B. Stratford, owned the Stratford Hotel in the Greenwood district of Tulsa that was burned down a little over 100 years ago. It was the largest black-owned hotel in the United States at the time. He was extraordinarily successful. He had pool halls and real estate and all kinds of things. And he was one of the pillars of the community. He was out there fighting the Jim Crow rules then, and he wanted to make sure that he didn't have to sit in the back of the train, and he was out there just fighting for his community every single day. And so after the race riots, he was one of the folks that got rounded up, and there was plans to indict him, and ultimately he was indicted, but fortunately he escaped Tulsa and got to Independence, Kansas. And my grandfather, C.F. Stratford, came from Chicago, met his father in Independence, Kansas, and was able to use his legal skills to stop Tulsa from extraditing him back to Tulsa. And there's a real risk that he would be lynched or jailed for a very, very long time. So my grandfather not only saved his father's life, but also was a real civil rights leader too, and started the first Black Bar Association, the Cook County Bar Association. He was very involved and engaged with the discrimination in housing and helped to argue the Hansberry versus Lee case in the Supreme Court. And it was something that was a very important landmark legislation or decision around the restrictive covenants that were so pervasive here in Chicago. So, I was lucky to have that kind of grandfather. And then my mom said that she was inspired to go to law school because she saw her father use his legal skills to save her grandfather's life. And so many of you know my mom, Jewel Offentown, was the first African-American woman to graduate from the University of Chicago Law School. And she was very, very engaged in the civil rights movement in her career. And I can still remember those early days when growing up actually on Greenwood Avenue, of all places in Chicago, I would, as a young person, sneak downstairs and see Reverend Jackson holding court in my mom's living room. They were so involved in fighting these important issues at that time. And then finally, while she was at law school, she met my dad, who had been an original Tuskegee Airman, and his father was a barber from Knoxville, Tennessee. And he was orphaned by the time he was 12, went to Teachers College, which is now Chicago State, and was able to talk his way into the University of Chicago Law School and get the GI Bill to pay for it after World War II. So having an original Tuskegee Airman in the family was really something special. And he, of course, talked about the extraordinary discrimination that he faced in working, flying overseas, flying over 100 missions, and the risk that he was taking for his country to get the kind of freedoms that he couldn't even enjoy back home. So anyway, very, very fortunate to have the family leadership that I've had.
That really is just an amazing, compelling story. So much success in your family, so much hard work in your family. And when you think about the Greenwood section of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and even Bronzeville, there's a history amongst the African American community in the United States of thriving communities, right? Great economic success, fascinating entrepreneurs. And at NHS, we strive to work with communities to rebuild these thriving communities. So we focus on home ownership, right? As sort of, that's always been sort of historically one of the main drivers of building family and generational wealth. From your vantage point, what do you see as other really important factors in trying to rebuild the economy in communities of color, right? To build this kind of generational wealth that is really the target of the work we do.
Well, I think we also have to have strong Black-owned businesses in our communities. I think that's just so critical. I sort of came of age when I got home from college in 1980. It was a couple of years before Harold Washington was elected mayor, and we all know he fought hard for Black-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses to be successful here in Chicago, because he knew that minority-owned businesses would employ African Americans and create wealth in our communities. but it was also a time when we were the mecca of African American businesses and entrepreneurship in the country. You know, some of you are old enough to remember the days, and many of you are not, but when I was home that first year in 1980 and 1981, you know, you'd pick up Black Enterprise and you would see that, you know, John Johnson had created the largest Black-owned business in the country with Ebony and Jet Magazine, and we could all be so proud of the Johnson Publishing Building on South Michigan Avenue. And then you'd go down the Dan Ryan and you'd see the beautiful Johnson Products factory. George Johnson was created Ultra Sheen and Afro Sheen products. He had the first African-American company that was ever publicly traded. And both of them each employed over 500 people in their firms. You know, primarily African-Americans with good paying jobs, creating role models for people like myself to say we could make it in business. And they were so engaged in their communities and so involved. And you know, the things that we care about, the things that your organization cares so deeply about it. If you think about George Johnson, not only started Soul Train with Don Cornelius, but he started Independence Bank that became, you know, the largest Black bank in the country. You know, it was just this extraordinary place, you know, beautiful building again on the south side, employing lots of people, giving loans to communities and entrepreneurs that needed it. And then, by the way, he would he'd be responsible for 60 tables to the Urban League dinner every year, George Johnson. And he used my mom and stepfather's law firm. And he used Burrell Advertising that became the largest black advertising agency in the country. And when Dr. King came to Chicago desperate to make payroll, he was there to make sure that Independence Bank backed the loans that he needed, and he got all of his entrepreneurial friends together to give the checks to keep SCLC solvent during a real critical time in the civil rights movement. So the reason I say that is just so important that we have those strong Black businesses creating these role models, creating wealth, creating philanthropy, creating political empowerment. You know, we can all rise together. And I think we've sort of lost that thread. You know, it was so prevalent when Harold Washington was mayor, when Maynard Jackson was mayor of Atlanta, Coleman Young in Detroit. Again, some of you are too young to remember that, but they were fighting for Black businesses that were going to provide these jobs. And we sort of drifted away. And it hasn't been that same priority. And of course, as we all know here in Chicago, all those businesses are gone.
Yeah.
You know, you look back 25 years ago, 3 of the top 150 privately held companies, according to Crane Chicago Business, were African American owned. 3 of 150. You know, not great, 2%. Now, 0 of the top 150. You know, we've gone backwards dramatically. And of course, I think it's directly tied to all the other challenges we face within our urban communities.
Yeah, I think I saw something that you wrote that said it's about 2% of all of the top, I don't know, maybe it was the top 500 companies in the United States, something like only less than 2% are Black owned?
I don't know the number, but the number of businesses of scale, you know, we are just a rounding error.
Right.
Again, if we have here in Chicago, a place that was the Mecca, if we have 0 out of top 150, you know, that's kind of crazy. And I think it's 3 out of the top 300. The numbers are just stunningly bad, how little impact we have from a business standpoint. Again, worse versus where we were 40 years ago. That's the scary thing. And there's data that proves it. The dean of Yale's business school, Kerwin Charles, used to be a professor here at the University of Chicago. He has data that shows relative to white Americans today, we're worse off than our grandparents were. You know. And the Federal Reserve of St. Louis has data that shows between 1992 and 2016, roughly 25 years, college-educated blacks saw their wealth decline 10%, while college-educated whites saw their wealth increase 96%. You just think about that. College-educated up 96% for whites, down for 10% for blacks. You know, it's just scary, and we don't realize how much worse off we are today than we were then, and how little participation we have in our capitalist democracy today in the United States, and in particular in cities like Chicago.
You know, we see the same thing in the work that we do. The home ownership rate now is really the same as it was in 1968. The average wealth of a black family in America is like $71,000 as opposed to over $171,000 for the average white family. And a lot of that is tied up in the home ownership rate. The white home ownership rate across the nation is like 75%, which is less than 40% for African American families, and just slightly over that for Latino families. So what happened, right? How did we begin to go backwards? Because you're right, I remember Johnson Publishing, the buildings, and so for instance, the work that we do a lot of construction and rehab, and so we reach out and we try and work with black contractors, Latino contractors, third-party professionals, brokers, and stuff like that. But we don't see minority-owned lending institutions and minority-owned investment entities that are doing the kind of work that we do and investing in the kind of work we do. What happened, right? How did we go from where we were to where we are now?
There's a lot of reasons that we don't have time tonight. To get into, I know it's like a late evening for all of you. I think I would just start by saying that as we get further away from the civil rights movement, there's this false perception that it's all fixed. We're doing okay as African Americans, and if you think about it, those of us who grew up in the '60s and we saw John Lewis getting his head bashed in, we saw Dr. King in Marquette Park, we saw what was happening in the South with the hoses and the dogs and the brutality of how we were being treated in this country. And I think as we get further away from that, there's just the perception that things are better than they are. And that's why I started with that data that we talked about earlier. I think it's so important just to remind people how bad things are. So I think if people think things are better for us economically, there's no reason to fight for equal economic opportunities. So I think that's a big problem. We get further away from it. I think the second problem is, our economy's evolved, and we're still playing by the old playbook. And we use this term supplier diversity. And everyone knows that, you're supposed to use a minority construction firm, sometimes a progressive institution, minority catering, janitorial services. That's important. Those are important jobs, those are important career paths. But our society has become a professional services, financial services, and technology-based economy. And supplier diversity doesn't touch that. And so if you look at the data for the McKinsey and BCG did this research report for our commercial club, our business leadership group. And it showed how money gets spent in the Chicagoland area. The number one is financial and professional services, roughly $75 billion in spend, with profit margins 5 to 20%. Number 10 on the list is construction at roughly $25 billion, much smaller number, with profit margins 0.5 to 1%. So all these well-meaning programs have been saying that when black people get a business opportunity, it's in the lowest margin, least growth parts of our spend in our economy of today. And if you go downtown, the biggest buildings, I work in the Aon Center, that's an insurance brokerage business. Hancock Center Insurance Company, the Willis Towers Insurance, the Citadel building that Ken Griffin built is hedge funds. You go down the list, Morningstar is a technology and investment firm. All of the most successful businesses today are in technology, in professional services, in financial services, in media broadly speaking. And if people keep only giving us opportunities in these low margin areas, I give this one story. I'm sorry I'm going on too long about this.
No, please, that's why we're here.
Thanks. A long time ago, I was president of the Chicago Park District, which is a great job for someone who loves sports like me. And I realized when I got the job that there are 9 museums on parkland, from the Art Institute, the Field Museum, the Planetarium, Aquarium. They're on parkland. They get direct subsidies from the taxpayers of Cook County. And so I said, you guys have a responsibility to live up Harold Washington's dream and work with minority businesses in everything we do. Well, since I was president of the Park District, I had some leverage. So they agreed to create a one-day symposium where they would bring people in and bring in minority entrepreneurs to meet with the vice presidents of these museums. They came up with an invitation for that one-day symposium, and on the cover of the invitation was a man with a hard hat and a shovel. And the tagline for the day's events was "Digging Up Business." Now, we talked earlier, my parents were lawyers. They didn't have pictures of lawyers on there. You know, I'm in the investment management and mutual fund industry. There weren't people like me. You know, there weren't investment bankers like Jim Reynolds, you know, or tech people like Robert Blackwell. They thought of us in only through one prism. And I think that is a problem that we have. It's almost the definition of implicit or unconscious bias. You know, think about black people doing certain parts of the economy, getting certain opportunities in our economy versus, again, the parts of the economy where the wealth is really being created today. So it's a way of just saying, I think those are the key issues. So one of the things, the University of Chicago, to give them really credit, they created a term, business diversity, to replace the term supplier diversity. And over the last 12 years, under a woman named Nadia Quarles and President Bob Zimmer, they went from basically zero to now over 100 businesses that do business with the University of Chicago in these broad sectors. And you guys know a lot of the people. You know, they advertise on WVON with Mello Span Cooper. They do accounting with Lester McKeever's accounting firm, and they did. They used to advertise in Ebony and Jet. You know, they used us in all aspects of what the university spends money on, and why everyone can't do that. And final thing I would say, so much of the wealth in these industries, in professional services, financial services, legal, accounting, you have to be able to bring in revenue to be successful. So when you're sitting somewhere and you're deciding how the money's going to be getting spent in your anchor institution, if you're not making sure that you're asking, do I have a minority lawyer on my relationship or a minority law firm, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, how do you expect any of us to have the wealth to match and to make progress over where we've been over the last hundreds of years? So it always comes back to those same types of leaders that we had before, pushing for equal economic opportunity for all of us.
You know, and you make an interesting point. So the theme for us tonight is looking back, moving forward. And related to that, so someone like you who is successful in financial services, people, minorities that are successful in media and technology, mentorship, right? Reaching out and bringing others forward. How important is that to begin to build that economy, to begin to give them access to that business and that cash flow?
I think it's really, really important. And what we've tried to do, I won't go through in detail, but we've tried to do several things. And over the 39 years since we started, many of you know Melody Hobson is our co-CEO at Ariel. She started as a summer intern, and I met her as a 17-year-old prospective Princeton student. So having that kind of a robust internship program for a small minority-owned firm, she had no idea she was going to be in the investment industry when she was applying to Princeton. And she had met me while she was applying to Princeton and then asked for a summer job. She learned about what we did. We were mentors, we were role models for her.
Right.
And now arguably she's the most successful woman in the financial services industry. Chairman of the board of Starbucks, on the board of JP Morgan Chase, doing all kinds of really important things in financial literacy. So role modeling internships, I think, is critical. And the second thing that we did 25 years ago when former Secretary of Education Arne Duncan worked at Ariel, we started a small public school and we created a financial literacy curriculum for the kids, and we give the kids real money to invest in real stocks. And they learn about the markets. They come down to our offices and see us, to your point about mentorship. Mm-hmm. They see us and learn how we do research. We come down to the school and talk to them about how to pick stocks. And then many of them then start to think about financial services careers that they never would have dreamed of, except that we decided to focus that school on financial literacy. All the hallways are named after famous streets like Wall Street or LaSalle Street. They've got a boardroom where they study the markets. They've got a Bloomberg machine. We've had leaders come down, of course, and talk to them about the markets. And I remember I used to take them every year, talking about mentorship and role models. I took them every year to the McDonald's annual meeting, where I'm on the board of directors. for a number of years when Don Thompson was the CEO. And they would get to ask one question during the annual meeting of a public, big public company like McDonald's. And then they would go spend an hour with Don and Andy McKenna learning about what it means to be the chairman and CEO of a company like McDonald's. And Liz Thompson would just constantly, talk to the kids about how hard her husband worked, the 7 days a week, late nights, to get to that leadership role at McDonald's. And those kind of role models are important. So during the Obama administration, I chaired his task force on financial literacy. And I think he wanted us to try to be able to find a way to inspire other financial services companies to partner with urban public schools in a similar fashion. And again, this school is 25 years old. It's a public school, over 500 students, and we've had a lot of success with it. And final one, we started a program about 5 years ago with the University of Chicago for minority students to get paid internships to work in the investment offices of major endowments. And the idea, if you're working in the investment offices at the MacArthur Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, or the University of Chicago Endowment, you're going to learn about all aspects of the financial services industry: private equity and venture capital and hedge funds and international and real estate and all the things that endowments invest their money in. So exposure to a world that many of us have never thought about or have been exposed to because of the segregation that we face in this country and the lack of economic opportunities we faced. We don't know about endowments. I had no idea when I went to Princeton that Princeton had an endowment that I could go and intern with and learn about how to do research in the investment world. I never had that exposure.
So it is about exposure, it's about mentorship, right? It's funny, my two older boys, who are not boys anymore, they're 29 and 27, actually were students at Ariel Academy when they were little. So how about that, small world, right? And it was amazing, it was fantastic. And my oldest son actually went on to Vanderbilt University and got a bachelor's degree in economics, as a matter of fact. So
great,
very much. But and you make an interesting point. So at NHS we do a lot of work on home ownership and financial education. We do classes, we do one-on-one counseling, and one of the things that we find often is, so for instance, myself, me and my wife, we own our home. When we bought our first home 20 years ago, I'd never lived in a house before, right? Had no idea what being a homeowner was about. But there are plenty of young people who wouldn't even consider a career in financial services, right? So the ability to expose, I think, our young people to the fact that there are other careers out there in these, like you said, in these areas that are high growth areas is really, really important. So we'd, love to be able to work with you at some point to expand that exposure.
One thing I was just going to say too in this area, it's some of these big firms, they have more impact than people know, especially in financial services. I always tell people, most people have heard of KKR. They're one of the largest private equity firms in the world, founded by Henry Kravis. And he's worth billions and billions of dollars personally. But when I ask people, how many people do you think work at KKR? What would you think? How many people do you think work at KKR?
Several hundred.
Yeah. That's what people typically say, several hundred, sometimes people say 1,000. Henry Kravis and KKR controls 1 million jobs.
Wow.
1 million jobs through all the companies that they control through their private equity purchases over the years. They control the boards of directors of those companies, they control who's in the C-suite of those companies, and ultimately all the money that gets spent in those companies when they are taking controlling interest in a private equity firm. We don't know what we're being left out of. It's just the amount of power and influence these guys have. And during the financial crisis, 08 and 09, there was a guy named John Paulson who ran a hedge fund called Paulson and Company. We all know here in Illinois, Ken Griffin is the wealthiest person in Illinois, and we see all the money that he's spending in the science industry being named after him in the wing of the Art Institute. He's worth, 30-some billion dollars. But people don't realize John Paulson, in 1 year during the financial crisis, as people were getting kicked out of their houses, he took the other side of that bet through the sophisticated financial instruments. He made $5 billion in 1 year. He meant $5 billion. And you can bet, like most hedge funds, there are no African Americans vice presidents or senior vice presidents working at those firms. They're not thinking about us when it comes to philanthropy, the opposite of the George Johnson, John Johnson example. And we just allow this to happen. I'm saying, look at Senator Collins. We've talked a lot about this and talked to our friend, Father Mike Pfleger, a lot about it. When I send him the article showing how much these guys make, of course, Father Mike is just like, heartbroken and flabbergasted. But it's just that, we have to, when we think about these young people thinking about careers, we've got to make sure we get us involved in the places where, again, the power and jobs and wealth is created. And if I could have that one kind of pounding away at that, and we have the ability to be participants in all aspects of it. Sometimes Reverend Jackson often says, we're giants with grasshopper complexes. Which I didn't understand what he meant in the beginning, but I think he was trying to teach me that we weren't dreaming high enough. We really are giants, and we can be great at everything if we're given equal opportunities to participate in everything.
Well, to that point, we're at a pretty unique point in time right now, right? With the murder of George Floyd, we had civil unrest behind that, and we had a lot of our major institutions that have made commitments to try and improve when it comes to equity and inclusion. We suffered through this pandemic, which caused the death and illness of millions of people, but also had just devastating economic impacts for communities as well. And our federal government is pumping unprecedented amounts of money into programs to help communities that have been impacted by this. We have a pretty unique, probably a situation that we haven't seen maybe since the Civil Rights Movement, where we've got a focused discourse on racial equity and economic equity. We've got commitments from major institutions to focus philanthropy and investment. And then we've got a federal government that has also got just massive amounts of resources focused on the same thing. Do you see this as a particular point in time that we can leverage to try and achieve some of the goals that you're talking about? Because you're right, we're not generally in those rooms where the decisions are made, to create access to this kind of wealth, right?
I think it is a unique time. I think both Melody and I we've gotten, I'm sure many of you in the room, we've gotten more calls to talk to CEOs and boards about how to move this diversity agenda forward. So the timing is right. Politically, it's the right time too. I worry it's going to shift. I'm no secret I'm a Democrat, but when you can talk to someone like Joyce Beatty, who chairs the Congressional Black Caucus, and Maxine Waters, who chairs the House Financial Services Committee, the amount of influence they have on the corporate world when these guys come to Congress meetings, and you have these dynamic, powerful women, challenging the Jamie Dimons when they come in testifying. It is a time where they have to listen because we control the White House, we control the House, and we control the Senate. We all worry that window will close in November. Yes. And so this is a time we have to really move the ball down the field while we have this unique opportunity of the George Floyd crisis and the kind of dynamic leaders, the most diverse congressional races we've ever had. And I know the senator is looking to be a part of that movement, and which would be so important when we have dynamic folks who understand the challenge that we face there. But if we lose the House, we won't be able to have that kind of support. And then finally, I mentioned the Civic Committee earlier. They are committed on this issue, and it's the first. The Civic Committee, many of you know, over the years has always had something they focused on. For a while, they focused on charter schools, focused on more runways at O'Hare, focused on the budget deficits in Illinois. Now they've decided to focus on minority entrepreneurship. And I mentioned the pro bono consulting from BCG and McKinsey. Now Jim Loury has been hired to move this ball down the field. So I think that the largest businesses in Illinois and Chicago in particular are going to be really leveraging this current environment we're in. And so I'm somewhat more optimistic than ever, but worrying that it could shift the other direction as we move toward November.
I think it's important that as we think about ways in which these major institutions can affect change in these areas, we really have to probably think a little differently than we've thought in the past, because you're right, this sort of juncture in time and maybe even this focus of resources may not happen again for a very, very long time, if ever. So we really have to think about ways in which we can deploy resources and make changes that are going to be really fundamental and really change the way things, you know, people can write a check, right? But writing a check doesn't necessarily change the fundamental issues that have to be dealt with. So we have to really think about changing the fundamental underpinnings of our economic system, really. So tell me this, because you're right. When you were talking about, you know, these giant hedge funds and, you know, they control a million jobs and billions of dollars. And you're right, when these decisions are made, people of color are generally not in the room. And when they're thinking about who they're going to do business with, businesses and people of color are generally not what comes to mind. To the extent that businesses of color have really been locked out of these rooms and these opportunities, these are decades of lost ability to build capacity, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we begin to overcome that, right? Because if I'm going to move $30 billion, I need partners that have the capacity to move $30 billion. So I'm not going to necessarily think about businesses and investment firms and stuff like that of color, because I'm thinking they don't have the capacity. Maybe they don't, because they've been shut out of the system for so long.
Well, you know, there's a couple of things there. You know, I often tell people, again, I go back to that period of 40 years ago. I guess I keep coming back to that because when I got home from college. But back then, all the investment banks that did the municipal finance work for major cities were all big white firms. Bear Stearns, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, these giant firms, right, from Wall Street. And they all had those contracts. Well, Harold Washington insisted that if they were going to do business in the city, and Maynard did the same thing in Atlanta, they're going to have black professionals and partners on the relationship with the city if they were going to do a bond issue, for example. If there's going to be a bond counsel, you're going to have to, if there's been the big law firms, they're going to have to bring in black lawyers. Well, when you look today, you jump ahead 40 years later, the biggest black-owned investment banking firms, you know, Jim Reynolds and Loop Capital, Chris Williams at Siebert Williams. You look at some of the famous names in New York that have built out major investment banks. They all got their start during the period that these mayors insisted that the white firms hire black folks. Ray McGuire, who ran for mayor of New York City. Everyone's of the same age, and it's not a coincidence. So once they got to be a partner at those big firms, got the contracts, were very successful at those big firms, they went out, some of them started their own firms, or some of them became top of the firms they stayed with, but they became the folks having the capability to run large sums of money, be the investment banker on large transactions, whatever you're looking for. So it can happen if we're intentional about it and have that kind of intentionality that prior generation had. And got a couple of recent examples, though I have to say there's been some good examples. Our speaker, Chris Welch, had legislation a couple years ago to force all of the publicly traded companies in Illinois to be transparent with their boards of directors. And just the act of transparency, all of a sudden Walgreens ended up with Valerie Jarrett on her board. No one's more qualified than Valerie. No one's smarter. No one understands more about all the issues. But they didn't have an African American on the board until they were embarrassed by the legislation that the governor signed and the Senate supported. Now, Congressman Robin Kelly, who's absolutely terrific, she's leading legislation in Congress to force all the major contractors with the federal government to be transparent with how they spend their money across the board. The same idea that if you shine a light on how the money's only going to white institutions, it'll have the same kind of profound impact the legislation here in Illinois had. And we're hoping to get a similar legislation here in Illinois Representative Lilly has just introduced a bill in the House here, pushing transparency in how dollars are getting spent by the major contractors here in Illinois, and how they spend their money 365 days a year, not just on one specific contract with the city or the state. So some good things are happening now. Again, there's more energy now. As I said, I'm getting more optimistic, but we have a long, long way to go.
So diversity in boards, diversity in professional services, we're starting to get a picture of what equity and inclusion begins to look like from a corporate perspective. Tell us a little bit about that. I know you had this theory of what's it called, the 3 Ps when it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion.
We've talked about this, some, and I feel like I don't want to keep you guys too long. But we started a conference with Charles Tribbett, who used to be the chairman of the board of the Urban League, and it was the most senior African American, and Russell Reynolds, the executive recruiting firm. And I guess 18, 19 years ago, we started a conference for African Americans on corporate boards. And the hypothesis was that we were getting in these board seats, but we weren't pushing the economic and civil rights agenda once we were in the boardroom. We were quiet and shy, maybe uncomfortable, making the white leadership uncomfortable. And I didn't see many Leon Sullivans, because Leon Sullivan, many of you who are old enough to remember, was the transformative director at General Motors when they were doing business in South Africa. And he created the Sullivan principles that really redefined the way that corporate America could interact with South Africa. It's kind of like what's happening now with the corporate America and how we're interacting with Russia. He had that kind of a profound impact from the boardroom. But we didn't have enough Leon Sullivans there. So we created this conference. Every year at the conference, we would have someone who would be the conscience of the conference to remind us that we have these responsibilities to each other once we're in the boardroom. And we had Harry Belafonte in the early years, Andy Young in the early years, Congressman John Lewis, et cetera, people who could remind directors that they have these responsibilities. And to make it easier for people, we asked directors when they're in the boardroom to focus on 3 Ps. You wouldn't be surprised. One is philanthropy, making sure that the dollars the corporation is giving away are not just going to the local opera or the symphony or the university, but are going to civil rights organizations and community-based organizations. So that's 1 P. The second P is people, measuring the executive ranks, how diverse are the people in the C-suite, on the management committees, of the leadership of these companies, because it's not, you want diversity everywhere, but so much will come when you have the Don Thompsons of the world in the C-suite. And then finally, what we talked about, the purchasing already, that holding people accountable with how they spend their money and forcing people to keep track of how they spend their money by category, so they can't fool people with one big contract that's a distribution contract and a low margin contract, but really being able to look sector by sector. And here in Chicago, we've had some companies that have done that really well. Exelon has had the best record over the years of measuring how they spend their dollars across everything. And former Senator Emil Jones is one of the folks that lit a fire under Exelon, and they did an extraordinary job of following through in that area. So those are the 3 Ps. You asked about it, and we're hoping that people will continue to ask those questions when they're in leadership roles, and that will really build wealth and opportunity for us in our communities.
Well, I think it's important that when we talk about racial and economic equity and inclusion, diversity, that these are not just theoretical terms, right? There is a way in which they can be implemented so that they're meaningful, and so that's why I wanted to sort of get at that 3 P, because that's a concept of how do you operationalize the concept, right, in a meaningful and effective way. And you mentioned Exelon, you mentioned the University of Chicago. Who would you say are some examples that are really doing this well?
Well, here, Chicago, we have one that's done the best of all time is McDonald's. They've been criticized lately. There's been some litigation that's very uncomfortable. But if you look back, and many of you know, there were so many. At one time, there were 300 African American franchisees. All what people call McMillionaires. They were so successful, doing so well. If you look at the Black Enterprise list of top 100 Black-owned companies in the country, 5 of the top 20 companies are Black-owned suppliers that supply McDonald's. If you think about it, companies like Baldwin Richardson Ice Cream, that was Baldwin Richardson that was founded by or bought, or Eric Johnson runs it. I could say, it was a company that was acquired, then they've added to it, and Eric Johnson is George Johnson's son. Well, he has over $300 million in sales. He has the largest, Chicago black-owned company. Again, one of the biggest in the country, and McDonald's is over $100 million of his sales. And they can point out everything from logistics to croutons to sausages. Many of you, was Brooks Sausage, and Frank Brooks had the sausage contract with McDonald's. They've been so good about giving African Americans opportunities to build real businesses of scale that have created multi-generational wealth. Eric Johnson's daughters have now taken over the company. They just gave $1 million to Julie Richardson's History Makers organization. And if McDonald's hadn't been willing to create that kind of economic opportunity, maybe it wouldn't have happened. And of course, Eric Johnson's brilliance in taking that one contract and then growing it and exploding it into a much larger business shows what happens when you have that kind of intentionality by a right-minded kind of a company and an extraordinary entrepreneur.
Well, they say that most of the businesses in the United States have I think it's under 10 employees, and most African-American businesses have even fewer employees than that in the United States. So there's some space where businesses need to cover in order to begin to scale up.
Well, one of the things I'd say, we do need to learn how to scale up, but one of the things that helps us scale up is when we have these stronger, large black-owned businesses. So I keep coming back to that, because I stay on message, those of you who've seen me speak before, But if you think about it, my reason I brought up George Johnson earlier, he prepaid over 3 years of advertising in Essence, when Essence didn't have enough money to stay in business. As I mentioned earlier, he was Burrell Advertising's largest customer. Starting Soul Train, starting Independence Bank. You think of all the businesses that were spawned because of his leadership. So someone can say, why do you want to make George Johnson richer by giving him another contract or opening up another store to sell his products? But if you think of the broad impact that he had, and we talked about the civil rights leadership he had, and then supporting Harold Washington running for mayor, supporting the Urban League and Jim Compton and all the work there. The beauty of a business of scale, it has this enormous impact on all sizes of businesses. He worked with my dad and my stepdad and my mom's law firm. When they needed customers, he was their largest customer. Buying, George Johnson buying legal service from my mom and stepdad's small, 10-person law firm. That's the kind of thing we need. It becomes a kind of just builds and builds on itself. And then those successful businesses hire other successful small minority businesses.
Yes, is that sort of circulator effect, if you will, right? And this, when we at NHS talk about home ownership, it also tends to circulate the economy within the neighborhood. Well, John, you see why we invited him, right? That's why we wanted to talk. The history, the success, and just the amount of knowledge that you're able to impart. We could sit here and we could talk to you all night, but I know you've had a long day. I think I'm getting the big hook to pull me off stage. So we just definitely want to thank you. We're really excited. This is our second year that John has joined us, and we're hoping to have a long relationship with you. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And congratulations for your award. I'm losing my microphone here. Yeah, can I get all of the awardees to come up? We'll take a group picture. Yep, sure. And I'm going to try and hook myself back up. There we go. Okay, I'm back on.
Thank you for your kind words and for your donation.
Oh, you're all good. I'm glad you got it. Okay, well,
Yes. There we go.
How
are you?
Thank you for this.
all the time.
Thank you for
A little closer. Fix my tie. Okay. All right.